All right, well, welcome everyone to the second cross-cutting compact settlement meeting. I'm Liz from the Climate Action Office, and I'm excited to continue this work with you all to go through these different pathways, strategies, and actions. And we'll first just kind of go through our agenda today. And you should all be able to see my screen here, but let me know if not. So we'll be first, Gino had sent a communication out that we'll kind of go through about smart growth strategies in the beginning, and then we'll move to the work that we had started last time. And there was interest from this group last time too, when we returned to really focus in on the pathway and strategy level first of compact settlement, and then go more deeply into the actions for revision. We'll have time for public comment, and we'll check in about like where we're at in terms of this work and next steps, whether we'll be moving all these recommendations to the steering committee or if we'll need to request potentially a meeting or some more work offline. And then we'll wrap up at 11. Any questions on the agenda before we get started? Okay. Gina, I'll pass it off to you.
Sure. I'm 2 hours west of you guys, so I'm drinking coffee. I sent around a draft of where the transportation group was headed on land use, and there has been a lot of tweaking to that, and it's in process right now. But I think what I need from this group is just the kind of overview, not wordsmithing, just where we're headed, a discussion on where we're headed, because I don't want to wordsmith here and then on a bunch of other people are wordsmithing. But getting a nod that we're headed in the right direction, I think is really important. So the strategy you can see here is to promote smart growth. And what you see in red is not, it will probably somewhere in the document, we're going to make reference to this study. It won't be here, but we just put it up there for your background. I don't know how many of you were involved with the VTrans ACCD study on smart growth and emissions reductions. It's something that was recommended in the last CAP, and VTrans helped fund a study, and there were some really interesting results. It was, the research before this was that yes, you could show in urban areas that there would be a reduction from concentrated mixed use development because people have more access to transit or able to bike and walk. But this modeled Vermont conditions and showed that yes, we would in fact be able to have a quantifiable emissions reductions from smart growth. And the flip side is there would be a detriment if we consider if the state went forward with exurban sprawl. So we need to let everyone know this, that we have a quantifiable benefit. Then that begs the question of, okay, what are we going to do about it? What are the actions that we're going to do to promote smart growth? And as you all know, it's the state's land use goal. It's what we're all supposed to be doing. So what belongs in this particular section of the CAP? And so that's what we're trying to do with these 4 action items. The third one has been worked on some, and I can explain what's happened there. But the idea from the first CAP, not funding sprawl, funding smart growth, that's going to be here. We've heard we need to flesh this out, but I think how this is done, the specifics, falls in other studies or other agencies in VTrans and ANR that are the main ones working on this. I mean, it is a cross-cutting issue. Maybe that's all we need to have in here for the purposes of this plan. But as we all know, the action should be specific if they're going to be real. who does it, what are the performance measures, not just, oh, that's a good idea, go do it. How do we do it? And then the second one is a basic principle of smart growth, that one agency can't do this alone. State government can't do it alone. It has to be in partnership with RPCs and the municipalities and the private sector. So how do we articulate that better to be clearer? Number two. Number three, we've pulled out the research that's needed to understand VMT and telework. Right now, we don't really know what the impacts are, and we can all sense that they're there, but we're going to direct VTrans through their modeling processes to better understand that. And so that part of number three is getting pulled out. And then we have to deal with, and we've drafted something that's very early on. There's some state mandates that are running contrary to growing in place, and that is consolidation of healthcare, consolidation of education. What do we do about that? What can we do about that? Those are big issues, and they're big policies, and they run contrary to reducing VMT if we believe that you need to live in place and work in place, which is the main outcome of the study. And then finally, we heard from several folks that we have an opportunity now with the changes to Act 250 to look at smart growth and more robustly and from a planning perspective. So better understanding what the opportunities are there. And we heard this from some RPC folk, that understanding what the opportunities are to better forward smart growth is through our land use programs at the regional and local level, and understanding the contribution that's going to make to emissions reduction and probably to resilience too, obviously for resilience. So those are the four actions that we have to date. They're a work in progress. We're having a public meeting next week, but I open it up to you all, with the understanding that further on we're dealing with alternative modes and bike ped programs and how do we fund transit and all these other VMT reduction related strategies and actions. So I open it up, and how this will dovetail with resilience, with what resilience is doing, resilience. In my view, these actions should cut across the plan. There's something about smart growth. We should use the same language. We should have the same direction, maybe with different detail in the different sectors. I mean, in the different, through the different committees. I don't know. Thanks. I'm all ears if anyone.
Thanks, Gina. Hey, Les, can you increase the size of this a little bit? I'm just having a hard time reading the words in these two boxes. Great, thank you.
Gina, this is Breck Bowden. I guess I'll state that I think that this is consistent. I have some specifics to report from, if there's time and it's appropriate at another point in the meeting here, from the AARP Livable Communities Group, and it's entirely consistent with what you're putting here.
Yeah, if you could forward that to me or put it in the chat, put a link to the chat, that would be fantastic, Breck.
Sure. Just to continue on that, the comments that I can put into the chat were specifically about items in the template for the compact settlement, but those comments are entirely consistent with this.
Okay.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you,
right.
Gina. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to get your feedback or Brack, whatever you have, and I guess I'm okay. We're good to go here.
Can I just say something real quick, I guess? Can you guys hear me all right?
Please do.
Yeah, I guess just trying to understand it more. I mean, I think transportation is huge, especially when we're planning these compact settlements in terms of like where the bike paths are going to go and where if we're looking at light rail, where that's going to go and how that's going to fit into these compact settlements. And I don't know, is that kind of detailed planning being
Yes.
considered?
Yes.
Okay.
This particular pathway is just not the pathway, the strategies. This one is just around land use and the contribution of land use to reducing trips. We have a whole other section on transportation planning and wise investment, understanding that our funds are very limited for bike ped and transit for what we need. So we've got to have towns and regions that are planning around those areas. In the last cap, we talked about a sustainable transportation plan at the regional level and also at the local level. So right now, the regions are doing a lot of work around, and I don't know how many of you are in the regional planning work through our TPI, through the VTrans TPI Transportation Planning Initiative. We're doing lots of planning around roads and bridges, and we want to have the similar level of planning around alternative modes, if you will, because the state isn't the best entity to decide, oh, a bus needs to run between here and here to serve XYZ group. That kind of planning, that kind of transportation planning needs to happen at the local, in the regional level. So yes, to answer your question, we have a big emphasis on transportation planning, and I can send that around by early next week. We'll have that ready to share if you land use types are interested in that. I really encourage you to attend our public meeting next week on transportation, and Liz can send you more information about that. Yes.
Caroline, and then we'll start the template work after that.
Sorry, I was a little late, so I was hesitating to comment because I think I probably missed a good chunk of what you're talking about. But I wanted to know if there's anything specific that you would were looking for in terms of the resilience aspect of it that I could comment on from the perspective of hazard mitigation. And then my other just thought, and based on what I heard, I'm thinking about scaling the concepts that you put forward. I live in a small community, and while I would love to live in a big city or a more densely developed community, because that's, as an urban planner, that's what I want to be in. I'm not, and that was the housing that I could find, and that's what worked for us. And I think that there's a lot of people in that situation where they are and they want to be thinking about their smaller downtowns and how they can reduce their transportation trips within their small communities and not be only focused on some of the larger communities like Montpelier or Middlebury or Waterbury. So thinking about those smaller scale communities and how those concepts can be scaled to them so that the planning commissions can understand how that's integrated within their town plan and their zoning.
Yeah, we're keenly aware of that. The rural issues. There are underserved communities in terms of transportation, often a lot of other things as well. So we know that the planning that goes on in Burlington is not the planning that's needed in Craftsbury, where I live. There's got to be the appropriate tools, and that's got to come through robust informed planning processes, so that then you can appropriately invest in microtransit or what other, electrification, of course, is the big issue. And a study was done by VTrans that showed the carbon reduction strategy. It was required for federal funding, advanced federal funding around climate change, and essentially, running buses that are empty is not good for emissions. Those programs are not benefiting the state in terms of emissions reduction. They're critically important for all kinds of social reasons and economic reasons, and you name it. We need to keep our eye on the prize in terms of getting people out of their cars. But the programs we have right now, the dollars we're spending aren't providing emissions reductions. But we need to we need to serve those who don't have cars, and we need to keep our eye on the prize of getting people used to becoming passengers as opposed to drivers, and how we do that, because that's the solution in the long run. But right now, today, and in the foreseeable future, these programs that VTrans is funding cannot be identified as GHG reduction strategies, according to the modeling that was done by the consultants.
Thank you.
Some of you may know this. Anyway, I could talk all day about this. It's not exactly relevant to what we're doing right now. So
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's this was a good discussion, but yeah, we'll return to the pathways and strategies here they want to dig into. And so yeah, last meeting there was interest to really just start with pathways and strategies, and then after that dig into the actions. So we can return to 25 here. There were some questions last times in the notes we wanted to revisit, and revising strategy of 25A. So I'll just give folks a moment to read those again. And then once you're ready, please just go ahead and share your thoughts on suggestions here for any revisions or decisions to keep as is or remove.
Do you want us to just dive into each of the actions, or?
Yeah, each of the pathways and strategy, those are just 25. Yeah, but feel free for you to start sharing once you're ready.
So I think for the strategy 25A, we had identified that we wanted to revise it, but we still need to come up with revised language, or should we not go to that step yet?
I think we go to that step.
Okay. I think that the one thing that we would want to integrate into that is just, the word resilience maybe, so that is included within the strategy language. So increase investment in infrastructure. We could just say resilient infrastructure, and then everything else stays the same. Or we could say needed to support a resilient and compact walkable development. Or the word safe could work too. I don't want to use just the buzzword if someone else wants to use a different word.
I like placing it in the latter part. I like that addition.
So resilient walkable development.
Support resilient, compact, walkable development, or compact, walkable, and resilient development. Yeah, it could go anywhere there.
Yeah.
So having both the beginning or the end, or just the end?
Just the end, it sounds
Okay.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, how's that?
do we have a consistent definition of what we're talking about that we can use throughout the document? Because, is it compact settlement? Is it concentrated mixed-use development? Is it smart growth? What's going to be our term of art for just, this is sort of an edit thing. We should be, if it is the same thing that we're referring to, is there some language that has risen to the top when referring to smart growth or compact settlement or concentrated mixed-use development?
I mean, for the name of like this group in general, the dictionary word,
Well, the name
I
of this group, and then maybe I'm getting ahead of the editorial process or the plan, but if we start now being consistent about using the same words, it'll be easier when somebody has to edit this damn thing and
Oh, I
make it.
see.
Excuse my
Yeah.
friends for referring to it, but it's going to be a job. It's you guys are going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, in terms
You-
of like the scope of the group, I think when we posed that at the beginning last time, I think the interest was to kind of go through this and then see where we land, whether we're calling this compact land use and whatnot. And then yeah, I don't believe we have there might be a definitions of these terms in a document that in the initial cap, but I'd have to go through it.
Be
I'm just
interesting.
mindful of the time we have right now.
Yeah. At some point, I think having common terms across the document on this issue
We
would
can
be
make a note of that. But before we move on, any concerns from this revision, or can we get to move on to the next?
I don't have any concerns, but just before we move away from it, you know, especially given what Gina was just talking about, transportation doesn't explicitly show up here. I mean, we walk around it, you know, sidewalks and bike lanes and EV charging and so forth, but do we want to explicitly add the word transportation to that list of sewer, water, stormwater, mixed use, or is that just going?
Good question.
a good
Anyone,
point.
any thoughts?
I would argue it needs to be there.
Okay. So we could add that in.
Investment going on in transportation.
Transportation. Okay. So then,
And I'd argue for that as well, especially given the comments that Kelly Stoddard Poor provided, which kind of revolve around transportation issues that I put into the chat here. And those would be more in the action area, so we can leave that until later.
that's great. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts, ideas around this one? We add in transportation, we add in resilient.
If we're adding transportation, I don't want to make this any longer really, but like, would we want to add like, communication into that, or is that extra? Because we're talking about broadband, but we're not talking about all communication. I just wanted to throw it out there for thoughts.
Communication to me seems a, well, very broad, but I mean, transportation is very broad too. It seems that our most dire need is around broadband, but maybe others have a different feeling about that.
I mean, yeah, I think broadband and all communication would be helpful for helping people to work from home, maybe, and for dealing with disturbances. But yeah, this is about land use. But I think it's fine how it is. I just wanted to bring that up.
Are you going to be in your action part? Are you going to be specifying different programs? Or are you just going to leave? Because I mean, investment in downtowns and village areas is huge on all kinds of areas. These are some, there could be more. You could say, and more. To me, it'd be relevant to pull them out if in fact you're going to say the VTrans bridge program will include sidewalks when funding is delivered to municipalities. That's not said very artfully. If the actions are going to go back to this, because you got to have actions related to this. Yeah, okay, recent, or we're going to require that sewer line extensions only occur in village areas or downtown areas, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, would it be helpful to just kind of take a look, look at it now just to see what these actions are underneath it?
Oh,
Just
so
all have
that's actually an action that you have there?
So these are all actions
Okay.
underneath this strategy, which is part of this larger pathway.
Because we're going to have an action that's the same as this. I showed it to you just now, increasing investment in infrastructure in downtown and village areas. And that's, yeah.
This exact strategy is in rural resilience.
No, it's in right now. The thing I just showed you, the number one action was increase investment in infrastructure. It isn't said exactly the same way, but it is the same thing.
Okay.
So first of all, to make sure the language connects, I was hoping to get more specifics on some of the policies and requirements around those funding programs so that we can say, we can have an actionable item around the V-Trans bike ped program, and thou shalt only invest in downtown and village areas, or where planning has occurred through a bike planning process, to put meat to the bones of the programs we're talking about, as opposed to, oh yeah, let's increase in what is, yeah, let's do that. Maybe this is all we can say for the purposes of this plan. It's what we've said, and that's what I was hoping we could put more meat on the bones, but it's a great laundry list. And I would say and more, or et cetera, or there are other things, because there are all kinds of things that the states and federal government's involved with that helps make art, for instance. There's another one.
Yeah, so I guess for this strategy, I think just going back, because this kind of came back to the question around like communications and programs and things like that, but we will get into the actions and they could get more specific down here for sure. But just for this at the strategy level, are we all good with this right here? Do you have any concerns before we move on? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And Gina, I'll just also make a note. So when we get to the strategy level, programs and funding, just so that we remember once we start reviewing at that level, we don't forget. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Absolutely. Okay, so moving down to the next strategy. We'll take a moment to read this. And then once you're ready, feel free to hop in.
I think that makes sense. I think that we'll want to update the actions a little bit more based on that, but
Keep as is from your perspective.
I think it's fine from my perspective, yeah.
My only comment is perhaps a nuance. In this discussion that we have been having about land use versus compact development, whether that's what we're going to call ourselves, and I don't mean to go down that road. I fall on the side of kind of focusing on compact development / smart growth, whatever, as being the descriptor here. And that being the case, I would suggest changing the land use issues in this to something like development opportunities. Land use to me includes forestry and agriculture and so forth. And certainly by concentrating development, we are protecting those things. But with respect to this strategy couched within what is a pathway that is focused on compact development, using that word in here, or the word development in here, I think would be useful. So to say to improve coordination on development opportunities across agencies, departments, and municipalities, rather than what I view as a more general land use term.
Could it be land use and development issues? Because not all land use would be development, or land use changes would be development.
Yeah, so that strikes at kind of, well, what do you mean by land use? And when I think of land use, I'm including all of the land uses: forestry, recreational, ag, and so forth. And I thought that those might be being handled elsewhere in the plan, and that this cross-cutting piece that's focused on compact development is a more narrow, it's a slice of the land use, not all land use. But that's just my take on it.
I mean, so weren't we potentially thinking about including more, like a broader perspective of land use within this conversation and not just compact settlement?
Yeah, that was a discussion, and I was saying that I was falling on the side of keeping it more narrowly focused. So
Got it.
that's just my perspective.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm just curious in terms of like where like a town plan would fall under, like, you know, if residents of a town come up with a town plan, is that plan going to be recognized, or how are these going to be enforced? Or, you know, is it going to be mandated, or is it going to be kind of a choice of the residents to implement these practices? How is that? I don't know, I think recognizing the town plans and kind of what the residents have come up with in terms of like protecting, you know, forest blocks and all these different things that, or development and all the things that are covered under a town plan.
That I was thinking the same, pretty much the same thing, or along those lines too. I was thinking maybe we would address that more in the actions, but
Okay,
yeah, but like a lot has to do with land use regulation. It's happening at the local level. So if I think it's all about support to local planning commissions. Um, unless the state wants to make some major changes.
Yeah, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, I can just add a little bit of context. Again, for those who don't know, I am at the Bennington County Regional Planning Commission. You know, there are no enforcement mechanisms in town plans, where the rubber meets the road, or maybe we should come up with a better phrase to where the bike tire meets the bike lane is, you know, in land use regulations, the zoning, that's where enforcement power comes from. So while town plans are, you know, have very important like policy frameworks that they set up and identify priorities for the community, it's really in zoning, where local enforcement comes into play. So if we're looking at actions here, you know, and looking in terms of actually enforcing some of these, you know, compact settlement patterns, you know, an action maybe focusing on more technical assistance and funding for bylaw updates. Like there is the state's bylaw modernization grant program, which is sort of a companion program to the municipal planning grant program, which both programs are really helpful for communities and provide them with a lot of capacity funding to do important planning projects. But you know, just keeping in mind that it's in zoning where like actual enforcement happens. Town plans don't, you know, they have policy and, you know, aspirational statements, but you know, they don't carry the force of law, essentially. So, you know, maybe there's worth having some language in here, action about, you know, continuing funding and support for the bylaw modernization grant, and continuing to encourage municipalities to update their zoning regulations to prioritize smart growth principles, because that can actually have an enforcement mechanism, although again, enforcement often you need to have the capacity to enforce, and in very rural municipalities, zoning enforcement is difficult because of capacity and, you know, lack of staff and that sort of thing. So just putting some context to that.
Thanks. And then Jael and then Gina.
just a response to that, like how would you address it for towns that don't have zoning? And I mean, I guess they just revert to Act 250, but yeah, just curious about what we would do for it in those cases.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be the best person to answer because all the towns in our region have zoning. So I know some of the other RPCs have experience working with towns that don't have zoning. But that's not the case in my region, so I can't really speak to that.
Gina, you're on
Yeah.
mute.
The
Yeah.
jurisdictional triggers for Act 250 in towns without zoning and subdivision bylaws are much lower, so they capture a lot more development, but not all. So there's certainly some levels of development in towns without zoning that is effectively unregulated by land use bylaws, though they would still need to comply with certain state environmental regulations.
I live in a town without zoning and we like it that way, but we do have 3 designated growth centers, and that allows us to go for grants for infrastructure and for planning initiatives and for bike ped. It gives us, it doesn't automatically mean we get it, but it gives us a leg up. So I want to add to what Callie was saying, that zoning is the one regulatory tool, but this strategy also talks about state policy and state funding. And that's really important to reward the towns that have done a good job at planning for smart growth and through designation programs. So that's a big stick. And Act 250 now is, as it's changing, will have a big effect on towns and requiring regions and towns to do growth center planning through the, Billy can talk about it better than I can, the various tiers. That's an opportunity to do good smart growth planning through a policy, of Act 250. So it looks like you've got public funding, I'd say state and federal public funding for mixed use developments near transit hubs.
Yeah, okay, yeah, no, so that's starting to go into those, yeah, the actions here. Before we go into that, so for the strategy level, we're saying, it sounds like revise, though not necessarily a ton of it, but to capture what was in the beginning, there was the interest of land use and development issues. It sounds like keep land use, but perhaps also add development. Was that okay? Is there interest in adding anything in here about specifically calling zoning, or would you like to leave that in the action level?
I think it's probably appropriate within the actions.
Okay, so where the update, the revision is as is, any concerns, thoughts on that?
What's governance regulations versus regulations? I thought governance regulations had to do with how your select board operate. I guess I don't know what governance regulations means.
It's governance comma regulations, right?
And what does that mean, governance? Does that mean following open meeting law and?
It's local land use governance.
Update that or change it? I just I don't know what you're trying to say there. Maybe better minds know than I do. I would just say land use regulations. But if governance has a specific
Yeah,
meaning,
I think that, yeah, it's not all, yeah, I think it's not all regulations. I think it's, there could be technical assistance in there. There could be incentive programs there.
well, then you would be saying update state and local land use governance regulations, funding, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, governance, yeah, maybe it's the wrong word. I wasn't part of the team that came up with that, so I don't know.
What about changing governance? I agree. That's a good point, Gina. What about just swapping out policies for governance?
Oh yeah, there you go. Then you don't need regulations.
Well,
Regulations are policies.
I think they're different enough. I mean, the
They're different.
policy, yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
So
that might work. Yeah,
land use policies,
Yeah.
regulations
okay. Comma, regulations.
and regulations and practices. I'm getting into being Miss Editor here, but
Land use policies. Okay.
policies.
Uh,
So they're separate regulations. You're not just saying land use. Okay, never mind. Go on. I won't pretend. I won't be editor.
I do have one other wordsmithing nuance. I just wonder whether other people feel the same way about using the word issues. To me, issues has a negative connotation, and maybe we want that in there. But I wonder about a more neutral or even positive statement to just swap out the word planning. I've heard planning several times in this conversation. To swap out the word planning there instead of issues, so it would be on land use and development planning across agencies, departments, municipalities. Or if you want to be even more positive, opportunities, so coordinating land use and development opportunities. Just issues is negative to me.
I
And is
like
it more
planning.
than,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sorry. Is it more than just planning? Is it also implementation too? So like the build out and all that as well, once the plan is done?
Yep.
I'm just thinking planning might be limited.
Planning and implementation.
So adding in, taking out issues and adding in planning and implementation. I just want to make sure, so update state and local land use policies. Anything else on this one? Okay, great. Well, we're just about at time for public comment, so I'll pause for a moment for any public comment.
Elizabeth, the comments that Kelly Stoddard-Poor made would have been as somebody from the public. I can, is it best, put them in the chat. They're really about the actions, and so drilling down further than the strategies that we're focusing on today. I can talk to them, or people can just read them, or I can send them as an email to the group. You're muted.
Yeah, either works. You can share them now. You can send them in the chat.
Yeah, so Kelly Stoddard-Poor heads up the AARP Vermont Livable Communities group, so that's very much focused on this, what this group is interested in, and she had 3 comments about what she thought was missing in the actions in our template. The first was she felt that we needed to call out transit funding and amenities that support explicitly, ridership and so forth. So transportation demand management strategies. So calling out transportation demand management strategies. She secondly thought that parking lots weren't mentioned at all, and that we're not going to get compact settlements if we're also building large parking lots. And so trying to do everything we can to decrease single occupancy vehicle usage. And I think Gina spoke to this as well. And removing zoning barriers that require parking for all new development. And then the third piece was calling out explicitly walk-bike infrastructure that's accessible to all, and everything that goes with that, the benches, lighting, bike parking, maintenance, and so forth. And then every place that we can use buzzwords that have a meaning, broader than, so smart growth is one of those concepts that has a deeper meaning behind it. So the Complete Streets program, promoting it explicitly in our actions.
Thank you. And I saw we got a comment from Jeremy Roy as well, saying it would help to visualize what we're trying to accomplish. For example, where are the transit hubs where public funding would be prioritized, and how far does that area extend? What does compact development look like in a square mile with a population of 5,000 or 10,000 or 25,000? Thank you, and thanks, Brett, for sharing those as well. And then in terms of
the transportation group is going to take those comments from AARP and put them. We have a whole section on much of what he's talking about. So not the parking. That's something I think for you land use guys and gals. But the rest of it we'll be looking at as we put in our alternative modes, build up our alternative modes recommendations. So I just want you to know that, Breck.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. I'll pass that on to Kelly.
Yeah, and encourage her to go on Thursday.
I'm not sure that she can. I think she was going to be here today, but she had a conflicting meeting. I'll let her know. She knows about the meeting.
Okay, good.
Thank you. And then in terms of next steps, so this was one of 2 meetings that the steering committee adopted for cross-cutting groups in general. And so the groups are taking similar approaches. Workforce is doing some work offline to prepare for their next meeting, so that way they can review it all and be wrapped up after that additional meeting. And education, I'm going to do some outreach to Agency of Education to get some updates, and hopefully we'll be in a place to also wrap that up after an additional meeting. So I'll open up to you all like what you'd like to do. There's obviously more work to do here. We have another strategy to go through, and we have the actions. So I just want to check in with you all to see how you'd like to approach this with next steps. Would you like to meet again? Would you all like to take some pieces of this and workshop it so that when you meet again, we could go through all of this? I'm also happy to help as well, as much as I can to get these revisions in place, but I want to open up to the group in terms of next steps.
Well, it seems like we're gonna have to meet again, and possibly do some work in between. Would you be able to share the spreadsheet with us so it's all in, like right in the front of our inboxes, so that we can be thinking about additional actions that address the strategies as we edited them?
So you all have ability to, edit this, and I'll share the link again. But anyone who with a partner account just needs to enter in their partner account to access this. Otherwise, if you have a state government account, you're able to edit this directly. I think it would probably, I wonder if you would all like to select ahead of time what you'd like to revise ahead of an additional meeting? Or would you like to have it just, you all have access, can edit what you can prior to an additional meeting?
Liz, do you want to put up a second copy of this so that you're preserving what you've got right now? And then, because I mean, if all of us jumped in and started adding things, it could make it messy. Or are you okay with this document being edited?
I think as long, I'm all good with this revised language being you guys plugging in to that. Any ideas you have, I think, keeping the originals what they are is important so that we all have the same point of reference. But I'm okay with you all. I think it would just accelerate the work,
Got
for
it.
you all to be able to edit into the revised language or say keep as is or remove or whatnot, onto the document directly.
If we had an idea for another action, are you okay with adding a row?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I would just signal it somewhere like parentheses, new action, or put it in red or something to signify new. And then for new pathways, those would go at the bottom here.
okay.
But yeah, it's just helpful to signify that it's new, when you add in a new action. But there are other task groups and cross-cutting groups are adding in new actions as well. So that's definitely a possibility.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I agree that another meeting is needed, unfortunately.
Okay, so it sounds like it'd be helpful. So I'll reach out to the steering committee to see about us meeting again. And then I'll also reach out and send you all this link, so you could put in any revisions or edits directly to this document prior to meeting again. Is there anything else in the interim, that I could do to support you all in this work? Or you think you're good to go if I just send this link and you guys could put your thoughts, ideas as revision in the template prior to meeting again?
Liz, will you be able to organize our next meeting for us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
all right, good.
I'll send out times to check availability and all that and organize a meeting. And yeah, and get that out and everything. Is there, so in the next like 2 weeks, would that be good for you all? Like, would you get an additional week to like do some work and then meet again?
I'll work with it.
Okay.
I just, from my end with the ag and ecosystem public engagement meetings, I don't know, that week is kind of full. I feel like, I don't know, it's tough, but we'll try, I guess. You're saying 2 weeks, so that would be the week of the 11th.
Yes, but I could also, I mean, I need to confirm what date the cross-cutting groups will be presenting to the council. I know in general, all recommendations are moving to the council December 16th. So we do have some time. That being said, there is a lot to go through here. So I just want to make sure there's some time, even if like we get a lot into the document prior to our next meeting, in case there's any follow-up needed, that we have some breathing room between that and the December 16th date, to do any additional follow-up work needed. But you know, I don't think it has to be the week of November 11th, but I think, you know, the more we kind of continue on and complete as much as we can in the next few weeks, I think it just help move the process along from my perspective, but it's really up to you all.
Yeah, looking at it, the end of the week might work better that week.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
This might help decide how we move forward, and maybe I missed this because I was not really there at the last meeting. Are we trying, do we have a concept that we've agreed to, like ideas, and then we're just trying to fill them in? Because it seems like as we wordsmith each one, it keeps us from getting to the final product. Are we in general agreement to the list? And we're just trying to put fine points on it? Is that what we're trying to do? Or are we looking at what's missing, what's incorrectly stated, as opposed to editing? And I'm not talking about editing for the English language. I'm just talking about editing, tweaking the meaning a little bit. What are we trying to do here? I
I
don't
think it's
know.
probably a bit of all the above. Like, I think as, at least from as I've seen the cross-cutting groups go through the process, it seems like, similar to what you're all doing, you're looking at like higher level strategies, pathways. What are we trying to accomplish? I think that discussion around like, it'll probably be going between compact settlement and land use, but then we'll come to, there'll need to be a decision made. But then also making these decisions about, are we removing these actions? Are we keeping them? Are we revising them? And then kind of getting into that wordsmithing. But I think also like looking at a higher level through these pathways and strategies, like, yeah, what are you trying to do?
Maybe for the next meeting, we require that everyone reads it and look at it and decide, prioritize what we want to talk about. So we just don't go through, and hopefully there'll be some agreement there. Does that make sense? Asking us to look at the list ahead of time, make comments and suggestions, not necessarily on a common document, but to bring to the meeting real tension points, if you will, or where the real problems, and not bother with the stuff you can live with in order to move through it. Because right
No,
now we just open up each one and it becomes a conversation,
right.
as
Yeah.
opposed to putting some prioritization around what we're trying to do. Does that am I making sense?
I think it does. I've got to go in 1 minute here. I think it does make sense. I think if we were to focus on the things that are either a gap, we think that it's missing, or it's really problematic. Forget the wordsmithing. Just, is it a gap or is it problematic? And we do that before the meeting. And then at the meeting, we can have a discussion about the wordsmithing pieces of that. Do we agree or not agree on those gaps and problematic things, and then any wordsmithing we want to do. And I gotta go.
Thanks, Breck. I don't know. I think Breck made a great recommendation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think as we're going through the revisions before the next meeting, maybe using a color coding and also maybe putting our initials on it so that we know who made the comments in case they're not the next meeting. And we can go through conversations about what we thought, what we highlighted as the most important things that we wanted to talk about with the bigger group. Or is that generally what you're thinking?
Yeah, have some prioritization in the discussion as opposed to looking at each one separately.
That sounds good to me. I gotta jump, but I think at the end of the day, the council is really only looking for a handful of priority recommendations out of all these groups. So, there's a million ways to improve each one of these, I'm sure, but really focusing on the top 5 that we want to move forward may be a good strategy. But apologies, I gotta jump to the next one. See you, everyone.
Thanks, okay, so it sounds like we have a plan. I'll set up another meeting. I'll send this out to you all. Highlight, or comment and just say like what you'd signal as a priority for the next meeting, and we could use those as like kind of like a starting point. Does that all sound good? Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.